Good morning, y'all. I'm on Mars Hill in Athens, Greece this morning with Ange, and I was going to read some of Paul's sermon that he preached from this very hill a couple of thousand years ago, and it's recorded in Acts, the 17th chapter. And Paul had been kicked out of Thessalonica and Corinth, which are just west of here, that away, and behind me here in the north you see this temple that's called the Areopagus, that there was a lot of idol worship here in Athens. So in Acts 17, Paul has this to say, starting in verse 22. It says, by the way, he was waiting on Timothy and Silas to meet him here, and then it was on the ocean so he could escape from this area of the world. Then Paul stood up in the midst of the Areopagus, right about here, and said, Men of Athens, I perceive that in all things you are very religious. For as I was passing through and considering the objects of your worship, I even found an altar with this inscription, To the unknown God. Therefore, the one whom you worship in ignorance, him I proclaim to you. So Paul says, I'm going to tell you about Jesus here. He's the God who made the world and everything in it, since he is Lord of heaven and earth and does not dwell in temples made with hands like that temple behind us there, nor is he worshipped with men's hands as though he needed anything, since he gives to all people life, breath, and all things. And he has made from one blood every nation of men to dwell on the face of the earth, and has determined their pre-appointed times. Isn't that interesting? God determined when we would live. Paul lived 2,000 years ago, and I'm living today. Isn't that interesting? He determined their pre-appointed times and the boundaries of their dwellings, so that they should seek the Lord in the hope that they might grope for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. For in him we live and move and have our being, as also some of your own poets have said, for we are also his offspring. Therefore, since we are the offspring of God, we ought not to think that the divine nature is like gold or silver or stone, something shaped by art and man's devising. Truly, these times of ignorance God overlooked, but now commands all men everywhere to repent, because he has appointed a day on which he will judge the world in righteousness by the man whom he has ordained. He has given assurance of this to all people by raising him from the dead. See, Jesus rose from the dead. And when they heard this resurrection of the dead, some mocked, while others said, We will hear you again on this matter. See, if the resurrection is true, then all the Bible is true, and Jesus is God, if that's true. So that's why they wanted to hear more about that. So Paul departed from among them. However, some men joined him and believed. Among them were Dionysius the Areopagite and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. I love y'all. Have a good day. Bye-bye.